India has been called the pharmacy of the world. Now, the world's largest manufacturer of generic drugs has grand plans to double its pharmaceutical sector.
The time is now to take this industry to the next level.
And with the possible decoupling of US and China's biotech industries,
I think the worry is that biosecurity can be weaponized and be used as an instrument of war.
India stands to capitalize, taking a bigger slice of the global pharma pie.
So I think the potential is really there, and the government is realizing that as well.
Yet, something ails India's pharma industry. A spate of drug recalls and deaths related to India-made medicines have tarnished the country's reputation.
दवाई से पॉइजनिंग हो गई थी। बोल रहे दवाई से पॉइजनिंग हो रहा है, इसकी वजह से उसको खून दौड़ना बंद हो गया तो वो जम गया है थोड़ा सा।
What has happened? Is that how a pharmacy to the world behaves?
How pervasive is the problem of substandard drugs in India? And with an eye on exports, can the country cure its pharma ills? Here, in the north of India, not far from Chandigarh, the shared capital of states Punjab and Haryana, is the town of Bhatti, a major pharma hub and home to Radico Remedies.
This is our quality control laboratory. We have a lot of different sections in the quality control laboratory. This one is the chemical section. Here we are conducting chemical testing.
Radico Remedies is just one of over 10,000 pharmaceutical manufacturers in India. Many are contract manufacturers.
Our major clients are Indian pharmaceutical marketing companies. Marketing company means company which does not have a manufacturing unit or is already having a overloaded manufacturing units. So they shell out their production to contract manufacturing organizations like us.
India is a pharmaceutical powerhouse. Its pharma industry is expected to be worth some $65 billion by the end of 2024. The South Asian country is the world's largest maker of generic drugs, producing 1/5 of the global generic medicines. It also makes 60% of the world's vaccines.
Well, the Indian pharmaceutical industry has been nicknamed the pharmacy of the world. By volume, they are probably the third biggest manufacturer of pharmaceuticals in the world. So it's a very, very key player in the world.
When I passed out and joined the Indian industry in 1980s, 80% of the medicines were supplied by multinational companies to India. But today we are proud to say that we supply medicines to 200 countries, and Indian industry is custodian of health around the world.
And currently, the whole industry is going through a shake-up. In December 2023, the Modi government revised Schedule M, which prescribes the good manufacturing practices for pharmaceutical companies. The revision improves manufacturing and testing quality controls to align it more closely with global standards.
Like earlier days, there was no regulation, and regulation was only on the paper. Now we have got Schedule F, which is very close to the global market, and it is a very important step, and we are trying to get to the global market.
Drug manufacturers have until the end of 2024 to comply with the revised Schedule M. Lifting standards comes as part of the government's ambitious plans to double India's pharma industry by 2030. And developments elsewhere could present a lucrative opportunity. In September, the US Congress passed the Biosecure Act. It bars US pharma companies from working with 5 named Chinese biotech firms.
The Biosecure Act is really about preventing national security threats. Big Pharma
when they're conducting clinical trials and they're gathering information to be able to prescribe medicine, they are gathering individual health information that is transmitted into the cloud, into databases that can be exploited. And the problem in this case is that these private companies, Big Pharma, are linked to companies in other countries, primarily China, who has really cornered the market on Big Pharma.
I think the worry is that biosecurity can be weaponized and be used as an instrument of war. In an event of a conflict between the US and China, these products can be used by both parties to inflict heavy damage on each other.
If the Biosecure Act becomes law, it could lead to a decoupling of the Chinese and American pharma industries. China is the fourth largest supplier of medicines to the US. It is also the world's largest producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs. These are the active components of drug products. Beijing has criticized the Biosecure Act.
美方应当放弃意识形态偏见，切实尊重市场原则和经贸规则，停止推进有关法案，停止滥用各种借口，无理打压中国企业，为各国企业提供公平、公正和非歧视的营商环境。
What Beijing is likely to do is to say the United States is turning its back on biosecurity cooperation. It is turning its back on issues that concerns us all as human beings, about the need to ensure human beings everywhere have access to the latest pharmaceutical products, so on and so forth.
It's a very easy lens to put on that, oh, this is the US is doing competition with China. No, it's very, very simple. It's the US government being very responsible government to protect their own citizens, and it is their right. And this specific act is to protect their own citizens, not the act of the rivalry between the US and China.
In any case, should America reduce its reliance on Chinese biotech, there could be an opportunity for India to fill the gap. The US is by far the world's largest import market for pharmaceuticals.
American companies can diversify with our friends, partners, and allies, with India, with Japan, with Korea, and with countries that really support the rules-based international order and follow international norms and procedures to the mutual benefit of all.
Indian pharma industry is highly excited as far as Biosecure Act is concerned. What we need to do is further build on the talent, think of scale, and strengthen our reliability quotient to leverage fully as far as Biosecure Act advantage is concerned.
But there is one hurdle: quality control. For India to expand its market share, more manufacturers will have to meet the US Food and Drug Administration standards, which are often more stringent than domestic benchmarks.
If I'm exporting to the United States or Europe, and I know a US FDA inspector is going to come and inspect my plant, and they have very strict protocols on how they conduct the inspection, I will try to make sure that I meet those standards.
Failed inspections can have dire consequences for patients. In 2022, an Indian manufacturer, Intas, did not pass the FDA's muster, leading the company to suspend production of cisplatin, an important drug for chemotherapy. Laura Bray runs a non-profit which helps to source for drugs that are in short supply. She was called to action during the cisplatin shortage.
This is pretty dire. This was a scary one. It was dire. And what we needed to do was make sure that our partners knew that this was happening, that they were ready with emergency supply if patients fell through the cracks, so that we could quickly triage as many patients as possible through our supply sharing network. So this shortage really harmed patients who were going through gynecological cancer. So women were really impacted by this shortage. And every patient who calls, we cry together. But those were some tough calls to receive. But the thing to know about drug shortages is they are not specific to a single demographic. They're impacting every patient. This is a crisis of the entire healthcare system.
If India wants to expand its pharma sector, it will have to shore up standards. This June, Indian drug regulators found that 36% of 400 inspected manufacturers were non-compliant and ordered to shut. While big firms have no issues of compliance, some smaller manufacturers have petitioned to extend the Schedule M deadline to December 2026. Vikramjit, he's making sure Radical Remedies is ready for the new standards.
So when we are implementing the conditions of the revised Schedule M, there are certain costs which are going to be incurred. Because when we are adhering to certain norms which maybe we are not adhering earlier, or maybe we are increasing some number of tests which we were not doing earlier, certainly there is going to be a cost for that. So when we are incurring all those expenses and we are facing competition with those people who are not adhering to those norms, certainly there is a atmosphere of unhealthy competition.
Meanwhile, other high-profile drug recalls have damaged the reputation of Indian medicine. What ails the country's pharma industry? Almost 3 years ago, Pramod and Sonia's son, Yash, came down with a cold. Nothing out of the ordinary for a 3-year-old boy.
जी उनकी मम्मी बताई थी सर्दी जुकाम है, तो मैंने बोला ठीक है दवाई दिलवा देंगे, 1-2 दिन बाद तो किसी बच्चे का हो ही जाता है.
तो दिन में तो पिलाए नहीं, रात में वो भी तीनों बच्चे को जुकाम था, तीनों को पिलाने वाली थी. तो एक तो ऊपर खेलने चली आई, एक सो गए छोटी वाली, वो लड़का जगा हुआ था वहीं पे खेल रहा था, फिर मैं पिला दी. खाएगा या कुछ? जब मैं सुबह उठी, मैं 5 बजे 6 बजे के करीब उठी थी, उस दिन लेट ही उठी, तो इसका ना ऐसे आवाज़ आ रहा है ऐसे कर रहा, फिर उसका मैं शरीर छुए, ऐसे ठंडा पड़ रहा उसका पूरा शरीर. डाल दी स्वाति.
The family rushed the boy to hospital. Doctors performed life-saving measures on Yash as his pulse dropped to dangerously low levels. For days, Yash was on the brink.
हमने पूछा जी इसको दिक्कत क्या है, तो बोला इसको ब्रेन में ना खून जमा हुआ है. तो हम 1-2 दिन
दवाई से पॉइजनिंग हो गए थे.
हाँ.
बोल रहे दवाई से पॉइजनिंग हो रहा था, इसकी वजह से इसको खून दौड़ना बंद हो गया, तो वो जम गया है थोड़ा सा.
Yash had been given a contaminated cough syrup. Manufactured by Omega Pharmaceuticals, the toxic cough syrup caused the deaths of 3 children. Yash was spared. But this isn't a new problem. Cough syrups made by other manufacturers have come under scrutiny after the deaths of 12 children in Jammu between 2019 and 2020. Beyond India's shores, India-made contaminated cough syrups caused the deaths of at least 70 children in West Africa. A recent Indian government report revealed that cough syrups from over 100 pharma units failed quality tests.
A lot of these cough syrup cases, which are in adulteration with diethylene glycol, these are cases where the manufacturing process has failed.
Glycerine, a safe product, is commonly used in cough syrups. In these cases, manufacturers use the cheaper diethylene glycol as a substitute. Diethylene glycol is mostly used for industrial purposes like antifreeze and brake fluids. It is toxic, even in small doses.
When the deaths happened, there were 2 versions that were going on. One was that possibly the cough syrup was contaminated, And the other version is that this should not have been prescribed to children in the first place, and that is what caused the deaths. We do know that there is a government report saying that the cough syrup failed quality testing without revealing the cause of that failure. And the Delhi government never published the report of the inquiry committee that was set up in the first place. As a result, we don't know what exactly came out of the inquiry committee.
There are many steps to making medicine. They first start off as raw materials and chemicals. These are processed into active pharmaceutical ingredients known as APIs and excipients. Excipients are the non-active component of a drug, such as the medium of delivery, additives to enhance efficacy, or ingredients to improve absorption. Both APIs and excipients are processed and formulated various products, which are then packaged and shipped. If the right precautions at every step aren't taken, each step can be a point of possible failure.
Quality has to come through design. Design of the very process of manufacture, the way the operations are carried out, etc. During transport, during shelf, the way they are stored even in a pharmaceutical store.
You are selling medicine, and for medicine, there cannot be any compromise on the quality because we are dealing with the health of the people. It should be strongly recognized as a criminal act with zero tolerance as far as the pharma industry is concerned.
Yet, in 2023, 66 Indian products were recalled from the US market. In 2019, the US FDA told Congress that India had just 83% of acceptable inspection outcomes, the lowest of all countries it surveyed. So, what ails the Indian pharma industry?
We really had to do a lot of work to try and improve our drug regulation.
Dinesh Thakur and Prashant Reddy authored The Truth Pill, a book detailing the sector's problems.
So there are basically three different categories of problems with the pharma industry in India. So one is spurious drugs. These are basically counterfeit drugs which are manufactured by companies that don't have any licenses. They're basically completely bad actors in the system. The second problem is adulterated drugs. For example, the cough syrups, which have the presence of diethylene glycol, right? Things that should not be there are present in the drug. And then the third problem, which is the most pervasive problem, is substandard drugs. So this may be a tablet, for example, which has only 50% of the active ingredient that is there on its label. Or it may be a tablet which does not dissolve properly into your blood.
So recalls are a not normal, part of the manufacturing process. It doesn't matter whether you're making car parts or you're making medicines. Recalls do happen. That's not a point. The point here is that what is it that you do to try and make sure that you fix the root cause of the problem?
In the case of India, one root cause is cost. About 87.6% of Indian companies in the pharma trade are micro, small or medium enterprises. Such companies often face price pressures. Driven by intense competition, drug prices in India are among the lowest in the world. Meanwhile, rising costs eat into profit margins. Contamination could be the result of drug makers skimping during the manufacturing process.
All the various stages of the material have to be tested mandatorily. The raw material has to be tested before it can be used. Then the in-process material has to be tested. Then finally the finished product has to be tested. This is the bare minimum.
While Vikramjit says he upholds quality, he has heard of others cutting corners.
So we are always trying to buy from those sources to ensure our quality, that our key starting materials are of the best quality. To cut down the cost, the companies may go in for a technical grade rather than going for a IP grade.
IP refers to the Indian Pharmacopoeia, a compilation of standards for drugs manufactured in India. It is published by the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission under the Health Ministry.
IP is the Bible for the pharmaceutical industry, and we must adhere to the IP. The pharmaceutical grade material is having a stringent control on the impurities. But in technical grade, there is no control on the impurities.
Cost cutting could also happen at the testing phase. According to the IP, drugs must be tested at each stage of manufacturing.
यहाँ पर सबसे पहले जो भी रॉ मटेरियल आता है उसको हम डी-डस्टिंग करने के बाद में सबसे पहले रॉ मटेरियल स्टोर में एक क्वारंटाइन एरिया में रखा जाता है। वो क्वारंटाइन एरिया में रखने के बाद में हमें इंटीमेशन जाती है हमारी क्यूसी में, जो क्यूसी उसको सैम्पलिंग करने के लिए आती है। शॉर्ट में बताया जाए तो कोई भी मटेरियल एक प्रोडक्ट बनता है रॉ मटेरियल से लेके एंड तक, बीच में हर एक स्टेज पे क्वारंटाइन करना पड़ता है मटेरियल को, और वो क्वारंटाइन होता है मतलब वो तब तक उसका सैंपल होके वो टेस्टिंग होता है, मतलब टेस्ट किए बिना वो प्रोडक्ट को आगे नहीं बढ़ाया जाता है।
But testing can be expensive. The cost of quality can be in the range of 25 to 40% of a pharma unit's overall turnover.
क्योंकि उन लोगों ने कभी भी जिंदगी में अपग्रेडेशन का नाम नहीं सुना था या तो वो करना नहीं चाह रहे थे, परेशानी वहाँ पे आ रही थी क्योंकि उसके अंदर बहुत ही सारा इन्वेस्टमेंट लगता है।
At the same time, the talent pipeline is not keeping up with India's pharma's rapid growth. In one survey, almost 8 in 10 companies recruit people with non-hard pharmaceutical science backgrounds to save cost. And when dealing with potentially dangerous chemicals, gaps in training and processes can have dire consequences. In April this year, the district of Sangareddy, on the outskirts of Hyderabad, was rocked by a massive blast. A reactor explosion had occurred at SB Organics, a chemical plant. Bakola Malesha worked as a maintenance manager at the plant.
డిస్కషన్ చేసింది అంతలోపే 4:30 టైంలో బ్లాస్ట్ అయింది. ఆ బ్లాస్ట్ అయినప్పుడే ఇమీడియట్గా అక్కడ సార్ చనిపోయాడు, సారు నాతో పాటు పనిచేసేవాడు అతను చనిపోయాడు, స్పాట్ 6 మంది చనిపోయారు. నాకు ఏమైంది నాకు తెలియదు, ఇక నాకు మొత్తం ఎంత కోసుకుపోయి అంత దెబ్బలు తాగి ఇంజరీ అయ్యి నేను ఎక్కడ పడ్డా ఏం లేక నాకు తెలియదు సార్. నాకు గ్యారంటీగానే ఇవ్వలేదు సార్. వారం రోజుల్లో హాస్పిటల్లో గ్యారంటీ ఇవ్వలేరు సార్ నాకు.
A preliminary report attributed the reactor explosion to the lack of qualified staff and safety norms. 6 employees were killed and 19 were injured. More than 6 months on, Malesha still suffers from the accident.
ఎక్కువ ఉంగనికి రాదు, మాకు బాత్రూమ్ వెళ్ళే మోషన్ గిట్ట ఇబ్బంది అవుతుంది. దానికి సంబంధించింది నేను సార్ని గిట్ట మాట్లాడితే వాళ్ళ చనిపోయిన వాళ్ళకు ఇట్లా ఇచ్చారు కదా సార్, మాకిట్ ఏదైనా చేయండి అని నేను రిక్వెస్ట్ చేస్తే వాళ్ళు కాదు అట్లయితే నీకు ఎట్లా ఒకరిని ఇస్తే ఇంకా వేరే వాళ్ళు ఉన్నారు, వాళ్ళందరికి సమస్య ఏం చేయాలి నేను అని నాకు చెప్తున్నారు సార్. అట్లా
As for Yash, taking bad medicine has left him with long-term health problems.
यश के बारे में क्या लिखा है वो तो मुझे पता नहीं है, पर जो दिख रहा है उसको सीजर आता है, दौरे आता है और आँख पूरा पीला रहता है, तो ये सब बस मुझे पता है कि ये हो रहा है उसके साथ, पर इसमें क्या लिखा नहीं लिखा वो सब मुझे कुछ नहीं पता। उस टाइम मुझे तो लगता है मैं अपने आप को क्या करी, क्यों पिलाई दवाई में, क्यों लाई ऐसा सोचती।
With the government revising Schedule M, will stricter regulations be the panacea for India's pharmaceutical industry? In September, the police in Nagpur, in the state of Maharashtra, filed a case that would shock India. Antibiotics supplied to government hospitals across the country were spurious. Their ingredients, talcum powder and starch.
If you take any industry, any sector, there are the very good people and the bad people. The main job of the regulators is to catch these bad people and bring them before the court who can really punish them.
The case was uncovered when Maharashtra drug inspectors tested a sample of antibiotics supplied to a rural hospital. On further investigations, it turns out that the syndicate was making and selling fake medicine across the country.
Presently, I don't have the exact number how much units were actually distributed to the hospital. But I can also assure the citizens that these are the rarest occasions, and as far as the quality of the drugs in the India and the quality of the drugs in the Maharashtra are extremely good.
In the financial year 2023, about 3.5% of drugs tested by the authorities are either non-standard quality or spurious. Revisions to Schedule M, designed to improve quality of Indian pharma, kicks in at the end of the year. Inspectors like Gahani and his team will have their hands full, ensuring manufacturers adhere to the new guidelines.
We, in Maharashtra, we inspect all the manufacturers once a year. If it is a minor non-compliance, we generally direct the manufacturer for comply the non-observance. But if it is critical non-compliance, we issue the notice to the manufacturer. We either suspend a license or we cancel a license. In the severe case, we cancel a license.
It may be possible that despite taking these steps, some of them may not implement it. If that is the case, proper action has to be taken in, and those who don't follow the right kind of process, they don't have the right to operate in the healthcare industry, because we are dealing with the health of the people.
But there is a hurdle. There is a shortage of inspectors to properly audit India's vast pharma sector. In Maharashtra, it was reported that the drug inspection unit is only functioning at 40% of staff strength.
Yes, there is a shortage, as I said. But firstly, you have to put your processes and operations in place in a manner that you are able to get quality by design. Regulation by inspection is not the way people work in the world now. Inspection is merely to see whether the processes are in place or not.
Testing capacity is another bottleneck. Drug samples have to be tested at a government-sanctioned lab. In the Talcum powder case, the antibiotics were sent to a lab in Mumbai for analysis. The results took 9 months. Reportedly, the Mumbai lab has more than half of its staff vacancies unfulfilled. It is also occupied with testing on non-drug samples like foodstuff.
Our inspectors regularly draw the samples. And the number of the samples we generally restrict as per the capacity of our laboratory testing capacity. And we have instructed our inspectors to focus on that areas where the drugs are mainly used for the common people.
I mean, the lack of regulation is definitely an issue, right? And then even the meager regulations that we have are very poorly enforced by drug inspectors, as we can see in outcomes that are coming out. And the fact that this entire system is operating in a very opaque black box further complicates the system, right? At least if there was transparency, a lot of this would sort itself out.
The shortage of drug inspectors and testing facilities means that not all the medicines that are in the market have been adequately tested. A problem because of how medicines are dispensed in India.
My name is Dr. Bobby Devan. I'm practicing medicine for the last 26 years in Delhi. When a patient comes to me, I examine them, and then we come to a provisional diagnosis. We investigate them, and then we have also reached a diagnosis now, which is confirmed. And once they've taken the prescription, they are free to go to any of their chemists and pick the medicine from there.
Private clinics in India do not have their own dispensary. Instead, the patient goes to a chemist, like the many here in Yusuf Sarai Market, to fill the prescriptions. However, with over 100,000 brands of drugs available in India, the chemist may not always sell the brands recommended by the doctor.
Just a simple example is, fever, we write paracetamol. And my patient, he had taken it for his fever, and 3 days of taking that medicine comes back to me, says, "Doctor, my fever is not coming down." And then seeing the medicine that he brought to me really did not look normal to me. And that's when I realized that many a times these are not the right medicines. Therefore, it's very important the kind of medicines that we write, that they are all originals, are not something that is manufactured in somebody's small house or wherever,
In many cases, the patients skip consulting the doctor altogether, relying instead on the chemist's recommendation.
हाँ, ऐसे दवाई खरीदने में डर नहीं लगता है मेडिकल से, क्योंकि ये आसान है और जानकार भी रहते हैं। काम पर से आते हैं थक के, तो ऐसा ही मेडिकल से बोल के लेके अपना चले जाते हैं।
आजकल ये ट्रेंड ज़्यादा बढ़ रहा है कि बिना प्रिस्क्रिप्शन के लोग दवाई लेने की कोशिश करते हैं। लोअर तबके और मीडियम तबके से थोड़ा ज़्यादा है। ऐसा और कहीं होता होगा शायद में भी, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ बिना प्रिस्क्रिप्शन के हम दवाई नहीं बेचते, वरना बिना बिल के।
डॉक्टर का फ़ी इतना महंगा हो गया है कि डॉक्टर के पास नहीं जा सकते हो, तो डायरेक्ट केमिस्ट के पास आते हैं। तो जो हमसे हो बनता है वो हम कर देते हैं, अगर नहीं होता है तो हम उन्हें डॉक्टर के पास भेज देते हैं।
I think that's a very big problem. These medicines given by the chemists so easily, so readily. For the short term, it's good for them because it gives them quick money. But long term, it's going to affect the population.
In the case of Yash, the boy was mistakenly given a toxic cough syrup. The tragedy might have been avoided if proper care had been taken.
Dextromethorphan is not to be prescribed for children under the age of 5. There has to be a question why it was prescribed.
हमने पुलिस वालों के लिए भी कॉल किया तो हमारे को वहाँ से एसएसपी साहब को फोन आता है कि तुमने दवाई वहाँ से ली क्यों?
तो हम लाएंगे
हमारी गलती यही है कि हम नागरिक हैं यहाँ से, जो दवाई क्यों नहीं ले सकते? सरकार ने इस चीज़ का खोला है तो उसकी सरकार नहीं देखेगी, हम लोग देखेंगे कि उसमें क्या कमी है।
To complicate matters, in India, even though medicines have the same generic name, for example, paracetamol, the quality may be inconsistent. Different manufacturers may use different formulations of active ingredients and excipients. At the same time, the drugs made for the domestic market and the export market have different quality thresholds.
In India, everybody knows this. We have dual track manufacturing. We follow one set of standards when we make drugs to export to the United States and Europe, and we follow completely different standard. The same company, when they manufacture and make injection for the United States, they use what is called water for injection. It's a standard that basically says that the quality of water that you use to manufacture injection has to go through a certain filtration process. Guess what they use for formulating injectables for consumption in India? Tap water.
Problem is with the industrial policy. Quality control begins at home. You need to have regulators. That's not the issue. But if I have started manufacturing drugs through micro units and small units and medium scale units who do not even have a quality control lab, I know it that they will often produce drugs which could be of lesser quality or not standard quality.
The revisions to Schedule M aim to change this dual-track manufacturing. The guidelines will bring India's quality controls more in line with WHO's good manufacturing practice standards.
WHO is talking of new regulation which becomes uniform, and we have been talking that there should be single quality standards around the world. And so long there is a convergence of the standard, it will lead to the best quality as far as patient is concerned.
Despite the obstacles, if India successfully improves its manufacturing standards, what opportunities await this pharmacy of the world? If the Biosecure Act was a signal of bifurcation between the American and Chinese pharma industries, the election of Donald Trump could split the rift wide open. President-elect Trump has proposed a 60 to 100% tariff on all imports from China. This would presumably cover both finished pharmaceutical products and APIs.
So the trade war has a lot to do with US domestic politics, and clearly one could argue the kind of globalization which the United States had in mind didn't benefit it across the board. Some people lost their jobs, and surprise, surprise, where did those jobs go? So I think on that part, one could argue that China was unfairly blamed for some of the issues within the United States.
According to the Atlantic Council, the US depends on China for about 6% of drug imports and about 17% of API imports. In one industry survey, US pharma companies estimate it will take 8 years to find alternative contract manufacturers, known as CDMOs.
It'll be painful. They will have so much suffering from choosing different partners. But at the same time, this will give unexpected great opportunities to the companies in the US to have the internal resiliency, internal stability, not only depending on the foreign partners or the one partners.
It will probably impact stock prices. It will probably impact supplies. It will probably impact individual prices of pharmaceuticals. And frankly and unfortunately, those costs will be passed on to us as consumers.
Obviously, one would hope that the US have got other sources with which to obtain these pharmaceutical products. Countries like India, maybe from Europe, Canada.
For Indian companies to fill this gap in the US and elsewhere, they will have to meet international quality standards. Currently, the South Asian country has 650 US FDA-approved plants, the highest number outside of the US. It also has about 2,000 manufacturers with the WHO's Good Manufacturing Practices certificates. There are over 10,000 manufacturing units in India.
The biggest challenge for the industry is obviously regulatory risk. They are supplying domestically, the South America, the LATAM areas, Middle East, US, and this regulatory landscape just changes fairly abruptly sometimes. And to keep abreast of that, it can be very challenging when you are managing so many markets at one time.
Meeting the revised Schedule M will allow more small and medium Indian manufacturers to enter the export market.
I personally take it on a positive way that we must improve ourselves and upgrade ourselves as per the international standards. The quality is your best salesman. Your product sells itself when it goes into the market.
Those who are ready to change will survive, and those who are not ready to change will die their own. Those who are not ready to bring better practices, better facility, better personnel, they will definitely die.
However, improved standards alone will not guarantee India's competitiveness vis-à-vis China. Here, there are some hurdles. Upstream, India is reliant on China for raw materials. India currently imports about 70% of its APIs from China, where they are more cost competitive.
Exports have been encouraged to what I call low-cost road to competitiveness. If you build it through by saying, I'll import my APIs from China, I'll depend myself on them, then you better check quality. If you don't check quality, the problem can begin at the active pharmaceutical ingredient stage itself.
Downstream, India is far behind its neighbor on the technology and talent fronts. In 2023, almost 20% of global biotech patents were filed by China, the most in the world. That same year, China companies invested about $240 million in R&D, 2.5 times India's $90 million.
The fact is that, talk is cheap. We don't have biology skills. Look, we have chemistry skills in this country. And chemistry is done. If you look at the drug supply for the future, it's all biologics and biosimilars.
Biologics are pharmaceuticals made from living cells or organisms, as opposed to chemicals.
Our capacity for biosimilars is miserable. We've never invested. This is a completely different ballgame.
So we don't have at the moment in place under the sun in the biologics as. So if a larger market shifts, we're going to be left behind. China will be ahead of us.
Biologics, cell and gene therapy, these are things that Indian CDMOs either have to develop or have to get a little bit more in depth into. But I think there is going to be a need for a more cost-effective solution to replace the existing incumbents.
As a result, India remains low on the value chain. The country's manufacturers mostly make generics or are contract manufacturers for Western pharmaceutical companies. Indian firms own few patents of advanced drugs.
We established national drug innovation laboratories called the Central Drug Research Institute, right? Why is it that after 75 years, we haven't been able to produce one single marketed drug from this country? Who's innovating?
To meet the up and downstream challenges, the government launched 2 production-linked incentive schemes for the industry in 2020. The first, worth about $822 million, wants to shore up API manufacturing and supply resilience. The second will invest some $1.77 billion in higher value products. Will these subsidy schemes be enough to advance India's pharma industry?
So 3 bulk drug parks have been created, one in Andhra Pradesh, another in Gujarat, and third in Himachal Pradesh. And the purpose of bulk drug park is that you provide common facility to everyone. So it becomes more economical for any API manufacturer to launch and build those APIs to create healthcare security, not only for India, but to the world.
I do not believe that India will actually, step into that space and actually be productive, to be very honest with you. Give you a simple example. In 2021, the government allocated 15,000 crores into a PLI scheme and said, look, use this money to be able to develop competence. You know how much of that money has been spent so far? Next to nothing.
In the end, it may not be that easy to decouple from China and for India to fill the gap. During the cisplatin crisis, when the India manufacturer recalled the drug, the US FDA turned to a Chinese drug maker to make up for the shortfall.
Every single day in the US, there are drug shortages that are impacting patients and causing even more disruptions. And no one's rushing in to fix it. The current system is broken. How do we fix it? We have to make sure both the people making the medicine and the people buying the medicine for us as citizens are ensuring that product is available for us every single day.
In any case, India's pharmaceutical sector is a key pillar of growth, with one government official calling it a rising tiger of the Indian economy.
So I think the potential is really there. And the government is realizing that as well. The future in India is obviously very, very, very promising.
Indian pharma industry is at a very exciting stage. And the time is now to take this industry to the next level. What we need to do is further build on the talent, think of scale, and strengthen our reliability quotient to leverage fully as far as Biosecure Act advantage is concerned.
I am bothered about not US and Europe beyond a point. I am concerned about the Indian people. Would Indian people get safe drugs, quality drugs? That's point number one. Would they get in an affordable manner is the second worry. Third, would they be available or would they be time to time only shortages, as is the case today?
On paper, certain regulations have been brought into place, but we have serious doubts as to whether any of those regulations are actually enforced on the ground. Because the entire system is so opaque. The industry is booming, exports are booming. Where's the incentive to fix this? Domestically, no one's bothered about this issue, apart from a few of us.
And we walk over the graves of all those children that died. What has happened? Who's been held accountable for the 80 odd children that have died in Gambia? It's been 2 years now. What has happened? Is that how a pharmacy to the world behaves? What I'm saying is it's great to kind of market yourself saying pharmacy to the world. I'm all for it, right? But peel the layers a little bit and start looking. We have like something different.
For manufacturer Gautam, at least, he is optimistic about what the future holds for Indian pharma.
इन फ्यूचर में शायद ही मेरे को लगता है कि 4 से 5 साल के अंदर अंदर में डोमेस्टिक के साथ साथ में एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट भी इतना इंडियन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कंपनीज़ को मिलता जाएगा, तो उसकी वजह से 100% के भी इंडिया का ग्रोथ है वो उतना आगे बढ़ेगा ही बढ़ेगा।